My fiancée announced she was leaving me for my best friend in front of 46 guests. 8 months later, she wants me back. But I'm not the same man anymore. My name is Elio, and up until that engagement dinner, I felt I had my life together. I was about a month away from marrying Lily, the lady I had been with since college. My best friend Sam was supposed to be my best man. My parents were overjoyed, and they were already making plans for the kind of future grandparents they hoped for. Everything looked amazing. But, as it turns out, perfection is only a surface. Beneath it lurked a jumble of secrets and betrayals that I was too blind, or perhaps too trusting, to notice. When Lily stood up during supper, the world as I knew it fell apart like a cheap piñata. Her comments rang in my ears long after I walked away. I recall how my mother's face collapsed, the horror in my father's eyes, and the awkward shuffling of seats as visitors tried to understand what had just transpired. I spent the following few weeks in a blur, staying at my brother's house while I figured out what to do next. Dan, my older brother by 3 years, has always been the pillar in our family. He didn't say much, just handed me a beer and let me nap on his couch till I felt ready to face the world again. I was grateful for the silence, the opportunity to feel, without having to explain. I eventually moved back to my flat, which Lily and I had shared. She had taken her belongings, but her presence remained in the empty places, a misplaced hairpin on the bathroom counter, a half-burned candle on the ledge. I poured myself into work, hoping that burying my head in spreadsheets and client meetings would relieve the pain. It worked to some extent, but every now and again, I found myself staring out the window, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Sam attempted to reach out several times. His texts remained unopened. I couldn't bring myself to confront him, not after what he and Lily had done. The treachery wound worse than I expected. We'd been buddies since middle school, bonding over our mutual love of comic books and awful science fiction films. I trusted him with everything, and he repaid my faith by snatching the one person I believed I could rely upon. So, when Lily walked up today with mascara streaked over her cheeks, I wasn't sure how to react. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, telling her to leave and never return. But another half, the part that remembered how she used to laugh at my foolish jokes, paused. She seemed lost, like a child who had wandered too far from home. I stood there, divided between rage and what felt uncomfortably like sympathy. "Elio," she replied, her voice cracking. "I apologize. I didn't know who else to go to. I wanted to know why she believed I'd care, why she thought I'd be her savior after everything that had happened." But the words would not come. Instead, I simply nodded and signaled for her to sit down. We sat in silence for what seemed like an age, the air dense with things unsaid. She finally spoke, her words coming out quickly. Sam had left her. Apparently the grass was not greener on the other side after all. She understood too late that what she thought was love was actually infatuation. She wished to return and attempt to repair the damage she had caused. But deep down, I realized that some things could not be repaired. I am not sure what I will do next. Part of me wants to forgive her, to salvage some pleasant memories from the devastation. But another part of me, the one that has been gently rebuilding, understands that moving on requires letting go. I suppose time will tell whose side prevails in the end. For the time being, I'm simply trying to breathe, take things one day at a time, and perhaps, just maybe, find a way to forgive myself for not recognizing the warning signs sooner. I sat in my car, the engine still humming faintly, trying to make sense of Lily's abrupt return to my life. The irony was not lost on me. I'd been trying for months to forget the way she used to laugh, how her eyes crinkled at the corners when she was truly delighted. Now she was asking for forgiveness, and I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The office building loomed in the distance, a sharp reminder of the life I'd constructed out after Lily. I was supposed to be inside, answering emails and pretending everything was normal, but, instead, I was parked in the lot, struggling with demons from a past I thought I'd forgotten. "Elio," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I acknowledge that I made a mistake. I am aware of this. But I need you to understand that I never intended to hurt you." Her words hung in the air, full of hidden facts. I wanted to believe her, to imagine that the previous 8 months had been nothing more than a horrible dream. But I couldn't get over the sight of her standing at that engagement dinner, her hand interlaced with Sam's, as if it had always belonged there. I shook my head, attempting to dispel the cloud of memory. Lily's apology was a balm, but it was also a dagger, reopening wounds that I had meticulously sewed shut. Did she truly believe that a few tears and a heartfelt confession could heal the damage? Could you erase the betrayal? The reality was that part of me wanted to forgive her, not for her sake, but for my own. I wanted to let go of the bitterness that had crept into my bones and find peace in the devastation she had left behind. But another part of me, the one that had learnt to stand on its own, wasn't ready to let her back in. I looked at my phone, and the screen lit up with a message from my brother. Dan, are you okay? Simple. Director. I liked that about him. He never sobbed, instead offering his presence like a lighthouse amid a storm. With a sigh, I texted back, yes. Just processing. She showed up today. His response was immediate. Do you want to talk about it? I paused, my fingers hanging above the keys. Did I want to discuss it? Did I really know what to say? Before I could decide, another message appeared. This one comes from an unusual number. Elio, this is Sam. Can we meet? I stared at the screen, the letters blending together as my heart thudded in my chest. Sam. The name alone was a trigger, a reminder of everything I had lost. He had not tried to contact me in months, not since the first rush of ignored texts and voicemails. So, why now? I had no idea what he wanted, but I knew I wasn't prepared to confront him. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. I closed the message without responding, my head swirling with contradictory emotions. The air in the car felt stuffy and oppressive. I needed to move, to get away from my own thoughts. Without thinking, I started the engine and drove out of the parking lot, the road extending ahead of me like a lifeline. As I drove, the metropolis blurred into a tapestry of gray and green, and the familiar streets provided a strange kind of comfort. I found myself walking toward the park where Lily and I used to spend lazy Sundays, back when the world looked full of promise. It was a site of memories, both cherished and terrible, but I needed to confront them if I ever wanted to move on. The park was calm, with the afternoon sun casting long shadows on the grass. I stopped the car and strolled toward the pond, which glistened in the light. I stood there for a time, allowing the tranquility to wash over me, before sitting on a bench. I closed my eyes and listened to the distant laughing of children playing and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity, a flicker of understanding. Lily's reappearance reawakened sentiments I believed I had suppressed. But perhaps it was a good thing. Perhaps it was time to face the past, address the suffering, and move on. I took a deep breath, the air chilly and crisp, then opened my eyes. The way ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep hiding from my emotions. Whether or not I chose to forgive Lily and let her back into my life was entirely my option. But for now, I'd take it one step at a time. Take one day at a time. My phone buzzed again while I sat there, lost in contemplation. Another communication from Sam. Thank you, Elio. It's important. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. What could be so essential that he'd contact me now, after all this time? I didn't have an answer, but I knew I couldn't ignore him indefinitely. Perhaps it was time to hear what he had to say, to finally end this chapter in my life. I stood up. The decision had been made. I'd meet Sam, hear him out, and then maybe I'd be able to move forward. The decision to meet Sam felt like a weight had been lifted. But as I drove to the cafe where we'd arranged to meet, I felt a different type of heaviness in my chest, the kind that comes with uncertainty and the worry of reliving previous wounds. Back in college, we frequented the cafe. A charming little cafe set away from the main street, with mismatched chairs and the aroma of freshly baked pastries in the air. It seems like a lifetime ago. I parked a block away, wanting the walk to clear my mind. The pavement was filled with fallen leaves, which crunched under my feet as I made my way to the door. I halted at the door, taking a deep breath before entering. Sam was already there, sat at a corner table, surveying the room until his gaze fell on me. He appeared different, perhaps older, or simply worn down by the weight of his own decisions. It was difficult to tell. I approached cautiously. Each step felt like a mile. "Hey," I muttered, barely above a whisper. "Hey," he said, standing awkwardly and waving for me to sit. "Thanks for coming." I nodded and moved into the seat opposite him. The quiet stretched between us, a chasm filled with unspoken words. I watched him, attempting to reconcile the guy in front of me with the former friend I remembered. His hair was longer and a little untidy, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept for days. I'm sorry, Elio, he said, his voice straining. I know I have no right to ask you to be here, but I need to explain. I leaned back and crossed my arms. Explain what, Sam? That you and Lily fell in love? That you thought it was okay to betray me? He winced, shame etched on his features. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. I swear it just did, and I know that doesn't make it right. Then why now? I inquired, truly curious. Why reach out after all this time? He hesitated and looked down at his hands. Because I'm leaving, Elio. I got a job offer in Seattle. I'm moving next week. The realization hit me harder than I anticipated. Sam is leaving. The thought of his being so far away seemed like the final nail in the coffin of our friendship. So, this is goodbye? I inquired, my tone tinged with doubt. Yeah, he replied softly. And I couldn't leave without trying to make things right. Or as right as they can be. I wanted to laugh at the foolishness of it all, as if a few words could heal the rifts in our relationship. But as I sat there, staring at the man who had once been like a brother to me, I realized that perhaps I needed this closure just as much as he did. Do you love her? I inquired, the words pouring out before I could stop them. He looked up to meet my eyes. I thought I did. But now I don't know. Everything's so messed up. I nodded, acknowledging more than I wanted to confess. Love was a tricky beast that did not always follow the rules. And Lily? She's staying, he said, scarcely audible. We're done. The words hovered in the air, a bittersweet reminder that the previous 8 months had not been a fever dream. I ran my hand through my hair, feeling the weight of everything pressing against me. I don't know if I can forgive you, Sam, I finally admitted, the honesty cutting through the tension. But I don't want to hate you either. It's too exhausting. He nodded, a relieved expression on his face. I get it, and I'm sorry, Elio. For everything. We stayed there for a little longer, sipping our coffees and discussing nothing in particular. It seemed unusual to find this tentative serenity amidst the rubble of our friendship. But when I glanced at Sam, I realized that maybe this was it, a chance to let go and move on with a little less baggage. We eventually arose, with the moment of parting upon us. Sam extended his hand, and after a slight delay, I accepted it. His grip was tight, a quiet reminder of what we had once shared and what we had lost. Take care of yourself, Elio, he added calmly. You too, I said, removing his hand. As I watched him walk away, a sense of peace washed over me. The past could not be changed, but the future remained unwritten. I turned to leave, prepared to face whatever came next. My phone buzzed just as I approached the car. A message from Dan. Mom has invited you over for dinner tomorrow. She said she was baking your favorite. I smiled while typing a brief response. I wouldn't miss it. I felt strangely hopeful as I slid into the driver's seat. Perhaps this was the turning point I needed. An opportunity to rebuild, to start over. As I drove away, the city lights flickering in the distance, I knew one thing. I was finally ready to let go of the past and embrace the future. But when I turned onto my street, my phone vibrated again. A new message, this time from Lily. Can we speak? I looked at the screen, the words blurring as my heart skipped a beat. It appeared like the past wasn't finished with me yet. As I sat in the car, looking at Lily's message, I felt a familiar tug in my chest. It was the same sensation I experienced when I first spotted her across the crowded lecture hall in college. The same feeling that had kept me awake at night, wondering what our future may hold. But now that feeling was mixed with something more, either anxiousness or plain old fear. I knew I couldn't ignore her indefinitely, just as I couldn't ignore Sam, but addressing her meant confronting all I had worked so hard to leave behind. I sighed, the decision weighing heavily on me. I typed a fast reply. Okay. Tomorrow. Her reply came almost immediately. Thank you, I will stop by your place. I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat, hoping to calm the swelling wave of emotions. I wanted a distraction, something to take my mind off the next debate. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine roar provided a pleasant respite from the solitude. Driving aimlessly, I found myself driving to the gym, which I hadn't been to in months. It used to be my haven, a place where I could tune out the world with the clanging of weights and the rhythmic hammering of my feet on the treadmill. I parked and entered, the familiar fragrance of rubber matting and sweat welcoming me like a longtime acquaintance. I quickly dressed and went to the free weights, hoping that the physical activity would help clear my mind. As I lifted, I concentrated on the burn in my muscles and the consistent pattern of my breathing. But no matter how much I pushed myself, I couldn't get the thoughts out of my head. Lily. Sam. The twisted web of our past continued to hold me hostage, serving as a continual reminder of what once was and what could never be again. I worried if I'd ever fully be rid of it, or if I was destined to carry these ghosts with me forever. After an hour, I gave up. My body was fatigued, but my mind was racing. I went to the locker room, spraying cold water on my face in an unsuccessful attempt to erase the memories. As I looked in the mirror, I couldn't identify the man in front of me. He appeared older and wearier, as if he had lived 1,000 lifetimes since that tragic engagement supper. I cleaned my face and went outside, the lowering sun spreading long shadows across the parking lot. As I walked to my car, my phone chimed again. This time, Dan sent a message. "Hey, are you okay? Do you want to come over for a beer?" I smiled, thankful for his unfailing support. I texted back, "Yes. I'll be there in 20. The drive to Dan's house was brief, and when I arrived, he was already waiting on the porch, 2 beers in hand. He tossed one to me as I climbed the steps, and we sat in the worn-out chairs that had witnessed innumerable late-night chats. "Thanks for coming," he replied, taking a sip from his beer. "Mom's been asking about you. She's worried." I nodded, the old guilt setting in. "I'll call her tomorrow. Just needed some time to think." He looked at me for a time, then nodded. "Lily?" "Yeah," I responded, the word lingering in my mouth. "She wants to talk." Dan did not say anything. He took another sip of his beer. He knew when to push and when to let me go, a talent developed over years of brotherhood. We sat in peaceful tranquility, crickets chirping in the background and the cool night air against my skin. I looked out at the yard, the shadows of trees moving gently in the breeze, and a strange sense of serenity came over me. "I met with Sam today," I finally announced, breaking the stillness. "He's moving to Seattle." Dan lifted his eyebrow. "And how do you feel about that?" I shrugged, unsure of the answer. "Relieved, I guess. Sad too, it's complicated." "Life usually is," he said with a slight smile. "But you're handling it better than most would." I appreciated the vote of confidence, even though I didn't fully believe it. We moved on to other topics, such as work and the latest movies, in order to avoid discussing the elephant in the room. However, the conversation finally looped back. "Do you think you'll forgive her?" Dan inquired, his tone kind yet penetrating. "I don't know," I said, the truth sinking into my chest like a stone. "I want to, but it's hard. Part of me still loves her, but another part just can't." He nodded with understanding in his eyes. "Whatever you decide, just make sure it's for you, not for her." I nodded, appreciating his insight. "Thanks, Dan. I mean it." We sat for a little longer, the stars glittering overhead and the world quiet around us. It was a moment of calm, a little break from the tumult of my mind. I eventually stood, stretching the tightness out of my limbs. "I should get going. Need to get some sleep before tomorrow." Dan nodded and stood to escort me to my car. "Call me if you need anything." "Okay, will do," I said, smacking him on the shoulder. "Thanks for everything." As I drove home, the streets were deserted and the world was slumber. I had a peculiar sense of anticipation, with a mix of dread and hope whirling in my stomach. Tomorrow would provide answers, one way or another. When I eventually crawled into bed, tiredness pressed against my eyelids, but sleep defied me. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, with Lily and Sam on my mind. I pondered what she would say, what I would say, and if this talk would finally provide me with the closure I so sorely wanted. As I teetered on the edge of consciousness, one thought anchored me. Whatever happened tomorrow, I was prepared to face it. Prepared to confront the past and, hopefully, find a way to release it. And with that, I fell into a restless sleep, thoughts of laughter and treachery swirling through the darkness. The early sun filtered through the slats, creating stripes on my bedroom floor. I lay there, squinting at the ceiling, attempting to put together the parts of my erratic dreams. Conversations with Lily and Sam repeated in my head, their voices blending with my own doubts. Today was the day I would confront Lily and perhaps find a crumb of serenity. I pulled myself out of bed, my shoulders heavy with anticipation. The flat was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic outside. I made my way to the kitchen, the habit of brewing coffee keeping me in the moment. As the rich aroma permeated the air, I attempted to concentrate on the simple task of pouring a cup, thinking that it would calm my racing mind. The knock on the door arrived sooner than intended, a stark reminder of the conversation I couldn't ignore any longer. I laid the mug down, my fingers quivering slightly as I wiped it against my pants. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Lily stood there, her eyes fixed on mine. She appeared different, older, as if she had been carrying her own problems. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore a basic sweater that appeared to be a little too loose on her body. "Hi," she replied gently, her voice tentatively whispered. Her words were in stark contrast to the frequent emails I had been receiving from her, which were full of regret and requests for a chance to talk. "Hi," I said, moving aside to let her in. She glided past me, her presence both familiar and alien, like a song I hadn't heard in years but remembered by heart. We settled into the living room, the silence stretched between us like a delicate thread. I watched her as she looked around, her gaze fixed on the empty places that had once held her belongings. It was strange to see her again in the spot where we had shared so many memories. "Thanks for agreeing to see me," she murmured, breaking the silence. Her hands curled anxiously in her lap, a move I knew all too well. "I figured we needed to talk," I said, attempting to keep my voice calm. "It's been a long time." She nodded, her gaze catching mine. "I know I hurt you, Elio, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Her remarks were heartfelt, but they could not change the past. I turned away, concentrating on a place on the carpet. "Why now, Lily? Why come back after all this time?" She took a long breath, her gaze shifting to her hands. "Because I realized I made a mistake. I thought I wanted something different, but I was wrong. I've spent months trying to figure out how to fix what I broke." I let her words soak in, the weight of them pushing down on me. "And Sam?" I inquired, wanting to hear it from her. "We're done," she murmured, her voice full of grief. "He's moving to Seattle next week. It's over." I nodded, relieved but reminded of the tangled situation we'd all gotten ourselves in. "I met with him yesterday," I told her, watching her expression. She looked shocked, with a glimmer of something, hope, perhaps, on her face. "And we talked. He apologized, said he didn't want to leave without trying to make things right." I stopped, carefully considering my next words. "I'm trying to move on, Lily. But it's hard." She nodded, a tear falling down her cheek. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me. Not right away, but I had to try." For a minute, we sat in silence, the only sound being the distant hum of the refrigerator. I could feel the weight of her stare on me, an unsaid request for understanding. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I finally murmured, barely audible. "But I don't want to carry this anger anymore. It's exhausting." She wiped her tears, a little, optimistic grin forming on her lips. "That's all I can ask for." We talked for a little longer, with the subject moving from the past to the present. It was awkward to talk about commonplace topics like jobs and mutual friends, but it was a start, a first step toward something like closure. She eventually rose up to depart, signaling the end of our time together. "Thank you, Elio," she continued, her voice genuine, "for giving me a chance to explain." I nodded and walked her to the door. "Take care of yourself, Lily." "You too," she said, pausing for a second before walking out into the hall. I watched her leave, the door quietly closing behind her. I stood there for a long time, enveloped in the apartment's silence. The conversation had been painful, yet important. It was a step toward healing and letting go of the past. As I returned to the living room, my phone vibrated on the coffee table. I lifted it up, and a fresh message appeared on the screen. It came from Dan. "Mom is making lasagna. Are you in?" I smiled. The usual warmth of family was a pleasant balm for my strained nerves. I typed a brief response. I wouldn't miss it. As I put down the phone, a sensation of tranquility came over me. The road ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could see a way forward, a chance to rebuild, to start over. However, when I proceeded to the kitchen, my phone buzzed again. Another message arrives, this time from Sam's number. "Hello, Elio. I've been thinking about our conversation. Can we meet again?" I looked at the message, my heart skipping a beat. It appeared like the past wasn't finished with me yet. I gazed at Sam's message on my phone, the words blurring as I tried to figure out what he wanted to talk about. We'd already had our closure, or as much closure as two people could have after such a betrayal. But here he was, reaching out again. My first reaction was to ignore it, pretend I hadn't noticed it. But my nagging curiosity, the want to know why, wouldn't allow me. The room felt too quiet, and the ticking of the clock on the wall became too loud. I placed down my phone and leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes briefly. It seemed as if the universe was intended to bring up the past, just when I believed I'd found a way to go on. I reflected on Lily and our talk the day before. It had been painful, but it felt like a necessary step, a means to relieve myself of the fury that had been my constant companion for the past few months. I expected to feel lighter afterward, but instead, I felt empty, as if I had been holding on to something for so long that I didn't know how to let go. Sam wants to meet again. I couldn't help but wonder if this was another step I needed to take, another piece of the puzzle I needed to put together before I could genuinely go forward. I took up the phone again, my fingers hovering over the screen. Finally, I sighed and composed a brief response. Okay. When and where? His response was quick. Coffee shop near the park. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I nodded, feeling a strange combination of dread and excitement settle in my gut. It was the same cafe where we had met the day before, and so much had remained unsaid. I wondered what new discoveries awaited me this time. The remainder of the day was a blur. I attempted to concentrate on work or anything else that would take my mind off the swirling emotions in my thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried, my thoughts kept coming back to Sam, Lily, and the tangled web of our past. That evening, I returned to Dan's apartment, seeking the consolation of his constant presence. He didn't ask about the message or delve into my thoughts. Instead, we watched an old movie that we used to like as children, and for a few hours, I was able to immerse myself in the familiar lines and predictable plot twists. But, as I drove home, the weight of the approaching talk returned to me. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep much that night since my mind was racing with possibilities for what Sam would say and want. Morning arrived all too fast, with the sun flooding through the blinds while I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I got up and went through the processes of getting ready, the regularity keeping me in the moment. By the time I left the apartment, I felt a little more prepared, ready to face whatever lay ahead of me. The cafe was calm when I arrived, as the morning rush had long passed. I got a coffee and took a seat by the window, where the beauty of the park provided a little distraction. I observed as individuals passed by, their lives appearing uncomplicated and unaffected by the drama that had occurred in mine. Sam arrived a few minutes later, his expression unreadable when he recognized me and approached. We exchanged a short nod, acknowledging the tension between us. He sat down, and for a moment, neither of us talked. The stillness stretched like a taut wire. "Thanks for meeting me," he finally murmured, his tone low. "Be careful. I'm not sure why we're here again," I admitted honestly, taking a drink of my coffee. "I thought we'd said everything yesterday." He nodded and looked down at his hands. "I know, but there's something else I need to tell you." I waited, the anticipation eating away at me. "Okay, go on." He took a big breath, his gaze meeting mine. "I didn't just come to apologize yesterday. I wanted to tell you about Seattle because, well, I wanted to give you this." He reached into his pocket and took out a little packet, slipping it across the table. I stared at it, puzzled. "What is this?" "It's a letter," he responded calmly, but his eyes betrayed his nervousness. "From Lily. She composed it after everything had occurred, but she never mailed it. I found it while packing, and I think you should read it." I hesitated, my thoughts whirling. Lily sent a letter following our engagement dinner. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what it contained, or reopen those wounds, but something in Sam's expression told me it was necessary. I picked up the envelope and turned it over in my hands. "Why didn't she send it?" "I don't know," he said. "Maybe she was scared. Maybe she thought it wouldn't make a difference. But I think she wanted you to have it." I nodded and slipped the envelope into my jacket pocket. "Okay, I'll read it." We sat silently for a bit longer, unsure how to conclude this unexpected rendezvous. Sam finally stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "I hope it helps," he remarked, his tone serious. "Thanks, Sam," I said, meaning more than I thought. "Safe travels to Seattle." He nodded with a faint, sad smile on his lips. "Take care, Elio." As he went, I felt a strange sense of closure wash over me. Whatever the letter contained, it felt like the final piece of the puzzle, the last thing I needed to face before really letting go. I sat there for a long time, the envelope in my pocket, before standing and going home. As I went, I felt a sense of serenity sweep over me, a quiet confidence that whatever occurred next, I was prepared to deal with it. Back at my place, I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of me. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for whatever facts the envelope might contain, and carefully opened it. As I opened the page, Lily's familiar handwriting greeted me. The words, "A bridge to the past." I began reading, my heart racing in my chest, knowing that this was the moment when I would finally be free. The letter rested on the table, seemingly mocking me for its simplicity. Only a piece of paper, yet it carried the weight of everything that had happened. I took a long inhale, felt the air fill my lungs before slowly unfolding it. Lily's calligraphy was familiar, with each loop and curve reminiscent of the person I once loved. "Elio," it began, her words a link to a past I wasn't sure I wanted to explore. "I don't know how to start this, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I've replayed that night over and over in my mind, wishing I could take it all back, wishing I could have seen the hurt I was causing before it was too late." I paused, my heart heavy with her regret. It felt weird to read her remarks after our world had fallen apart. I continued, each sentence taking me further back in time. "I was selfish, Elio. I thought I was doing what was right for me, but I didn't see how wrong it was for us. He was a mistake. I see that now. I was looking for something, but I didn't realize I already had it with you." Her admittance served as both a balm and a wound. I'd spent months trying to figure out why, piecing together the pieces of our relationship, and here it was all laid naked in her handwriting. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I've lost that right, but I hope one day you can find it in your heart to remember the good times we had. I hope you can find happiness, even if it's not with me." I put the letter down, my hands quivering slightly. It was everything I needed to hear, and nothing I wanted to know. Her comments were genuine, but they could not alter the past. They couldn't undo the betrayal or the months of suffering that followed. Nevertheless, I felt a peculiar sense of tranquility wash over me. Perhaps it was the finality of it, knowing that I'd heard her side and confronted the ghosts of our past. Perhaps it was the awareness that I no longer had to hold this resentment and could choose to let it go. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes briefly. The flat was quiet, with the only sound being the distant buzz of traffic outside. I took a long breath and felt the tension gently leave my body. It was over. The chapter that had dominated my life for so long was finally coming to an end. I had faced Sam. I had faced Lily. And now I had to face myself, the person I'd become as a result of it all. The individual who was stronger, wiser, and possibly more cautious. I arose, carefully folding the letter and placing it back in the envelope. It was now part of my tale, a reminder of where I had been and how far I had come. But it did not define me. Not anymore. As I strolled to the window, I observed the world outside, the metropolis alive with the rush and bustle of daily life. People go about their daily lives, ignorant of the inner fights taking place behind closed doors. I felt a connection with them, a common awareness of the hardships and successes that define us as humans. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. A message from Dan. "Dinner's at 6 o'clock, don't be late." I smiled, the warmth of family providing a comfortable presence in my life. I typed a brief response. "I'll be there." As I put down the phone, I felt a sense of anticipation for the future. The road ahead remained unpredictable, but for the first time in a long time, I felt prepared to face it, eager to welcome whatever came next, confident that I had the strength to deal with it. I took one last look at the letter, saying my final goodbye to the past, before walking out the door. The sun was sinking, creating a pleasant glow over the city. And as I walked, I noticed a lightness in my step and a fresh freedom in my heart. The past was behind me, and I was free to define the future. Whatever it brought, I knew I was prepared. I'm ready to live, love, and discover my own route forward. And as I made my way to Dan's, I had a peaceful conviction that everything would be well.